Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Today, I want to cover a topic that I have not had a chance to cover, but I really have wanted to, especially since several folks have asked me to, and that is, what the heck is the multimeter and what is it trying to tell you? The multimeter is an amazing metering tool that comes right within Logic, and it combines all the various metering tools into one helpful window. If we take a quick look at it right on my stereo output, and this is typically where you would place the multimeter and many of the metering plugins in Logic on the stereo output so you can see how your whole mix is working. And if we shrink this down a hair, what the multimeter is a combination of a spectrum analyzer, various tools for judging the phase and mono compatibility of your tracks, loudness meters, level meters, everything all in one. And if we dive into the plugin menu here and take a look at the metering tools, we have correlation meter, which is right in the right-hand side of the multimeter. The level meter, which is same side. Loudness meter. Everything is combined into one, and this is so helpful for judging what is going on with your mixes. So I want to give you a quick overview of what we're looking at and how I generally use the multimeter to help me make better mixing decisions. To start with, we should take a listen to this riff that I created over the weekend, just so we've got something in mind. And then we'll start to dive in. So take a quick listen. Here we go. Cool. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop, came up with something kind of spooky, very fitting for the season. What we have here is that we have some synths, we've got some electronic drums, we have, a synth that's playing as a bass, and the multimeter can help us figure out if there are any problems with this arrangement. Now, we are far from a completed mix, but we're going to assume that we're pretty close, and we're trying to double check some stuff. So I'm going to squash this down a hair. And what we're looking at is we have a spectrum analyzer. And this is just like your channel EQ spectrum analyzer. It's telling you how much is going on in the different frequency areas across the entire spectrum, from as low as 16 hertz up to 20 hertz and above. And we can see the view from 0 going down. And you can also adjust the scale of the analyzer either by dragging on this top section. So we're going further and further down. So we're seeing, negative 40 and below, or we can go, as high as plus 20. So 20 and below down to negative 60. Go all the way down, 120. So I generally leave this at plus 5 just to see if anything's exceeding 0 dB. And then the range you can adjust as well. So we can really get fine here and see, plus 5 down to negative 14 if we want to look at just the tippy top. And if we bring this way up, the range of 80 dB, so we're seeing down to negative 70. So this is providing us with a great view of our mix. Let's just pick the busier section here, and we'll just watch what's going on here. And we can also adjust this between 63 bands and 31 bands, depending on how fine-tuned you want to get. We can also set the detection to either just the left side, just the right side, both the left and right combined as if it were a single mono track, or the left and right max. And then we can choose between an average, either slow or fast, that would be the RMS modes here, or peak activity. So peak is just like your peak meters, the moment by moment level of the different frequencies, or we can choose something a little more average. I generally just run with peak and mono because generally I want to look at my entire mix as one. And we can also adjust the return rate. So check this out. If we set this to, 50 dB, or 4 dB per second. It's pretty cool. You can get as fine-tuned as you want with this multimeter, and I would call this a very professional metering tool because not only do you get a spectrum analyzer, and it's not as fine-tuned as the channel EQ or the linear EQ, but still very helpful. But additionally, we can also set the peak values, and then we can start taking a look at the level meters here. So if you're having a hard time trying to isolate, like, where is that peak that is bothering you? Well, then set the peak to 2 seconds or 4 or 6 or an infinite, and then you'll know exactly where those peaks are. Cool. From here, we have, loudness meters, we have level meters at the left and right channels, and how loud they are moment by moment. And you can actually choose between either peak or RMS, so we're getting an average or the peak activity, peak and RMS together. And you can even include true peak metering as well, which is very important these days when you're mastering your own tracks or mastering other tracks, because you don't want to have intersample peaks that are occurring. Even though you set your limiter, negative 0.3, you might still be getting some activity that's a little louder than you expect. First, let's take a look at peak and RMS. This is exactly the same as the level meter in Logic. So if you just want to break out the level meter by itself, you don't have to use the multimeter. That's fine, and you can set this to as big or small as you need it. But let's take a quick look. So we're seeing a peak activity of -1, which is great because I set my adaptive limiter here to -1. But we're also seeing an average volume of -11. So we've got roughly 10 or 11 dB between the peak and the average. But let's take a look at what the true peak activity might be looking like. Isn't that fascinating? -0.5, -0.7. That's interesting since the adaptive limiter is set to -1. But let's turn on true peak detection here so we can see if that makes a difference. Now we've reduced it below -1, but I'm hearing a bit of distortion. Now check it out. If I bring this up to -3, we're going to see some intersample peaks. There it is, 0.1, so good to know. And that's why the multimeter is so helpful. It provides us a view of the entire spectrum of this mix. We have the level meters, we have loudness meters, so we can see, are we hitting that range where a lot of blogs and YouTube channels and various sites are telling us where we should be hitting, which is roughly -14 on the loudness meters. And we would be looking at this integrated value. And of course, you would play this over the entire duration of the song to see, the entire song stacked up. How does it integrate in terms of loudness? But for the sake of just being quick, let's take a look at where we're at. Cool, so -14, maybe -13, and we can play with the adaptive limiter if we wanted to. And again, we can set peak hold values if we want to see specific values for longer than, the moment by moment duration. So let's set this to infinite, just so we can see on the meters here what's going on. Cool. And we can also set target values for both the level meter and the loudness meter. So if you want to say, okay, -14, I don't want to exceed that in terms of loudness, cool, you can set that. And then you can always watch for this. And if you see the level exceed this level threshold, it'll turn yellow to let you know, okay, you're exceeding the threshold. And I can set the level meter, if I'm mixing, maybe I want to set this to -3. If I'm mastering, maybe -1. Cool. Now we've examined quite a bit. Now remember, this is a demo. This is not a mixed track. And by looking at the spectrum analyzer, I'm getting some ideas on maybe where things are at. The kick drum is obviously very loud, and you can see that the low end is really pumping above everything else, and the spectrum also looks kind of scooped. There's not a lot of mid-range activity. Now, in my mind, there would be a vocalist, there would be vocals, there would be more instrumentation, and thus that would probably fill in a lot of the mid-range activity. Now, maybe the kick is a little too loud, so I might want to go to my instrument and turn down kick 2 here by maybe 3 dB to try to just take some of the pressure off the low end because it's looking a little too slanted right now. Okay, so it makes sense, right? We have a spectrum analyzer to help us identify like what's going on across the spectrum, so we're not too top heavy, too low end heavy, or whatever else. We have level meters to help us identify where our levels are hitting. Are we getting true peak activity or inner sample peaks that we need to take care of by adjusting our output limiter or level? We have a loudness meter to help us see if we're hitting that threshold for streaming services. And, now that everybody's telling us stop making tracks so loud, are we hitting that like -14 threshold? Roughly, depending on the streaming service. But the most important part, in my opinion, of the multimeter is the goniometer and the correlation meter. Now, what the heck is a goniometer? What the heck is a correlation meter? They're not immediately obvious, but they are so important to your mixing life, like so very important. So let's take a listen to this beginning section here, and let's just watch what is going on right here. And I'll even bring this a little bigger. Cool, let's check it out. Cool, there's a red side and a green side, and this should indicate to us that one is bad and one is good. The green side lets us know that our mix is mono-compatible, meaning that if we collapse this entire mix down to a single speaker or a single point of reference, nothing's going to disappear, nothing's going to sound phasey, like everything's going to be there and well represented. While the red side says, hey, there's some phase problems going on, there's some imbalance issues going on, and when you collapse this to mono, you're maybe not going to hear everything the way that you thought you were going to hear everything. And that's a mega problem. You can see that one of the instruments is bringing us down into the red side during the intro because it's pretty sparse. And the synth has a lot of stereo information. It's leaning to one side, the left side. And so we're dipping down into the red. Now, once in a while might not be a terrible thing. And you can even double check using a gain plugin on the stereo output. So if we just collapse this to mono, we can take a quick look and just see, how does it sound? Cool, and obviously we're not seeing any action down here because the gain plugin is before the multimeter. If I place it afterwards, we're going to see that action again. Okay, cool. Then when we get into the louder section here, everything takes care of itself because now we have drums, we have a lot of instrumentation in the center, maybe a little too much in the center, but our bass and our kick and everything that should be in the center is, and it reinforces that mono compatibility for the track. It's not leaning to one side a little too much. Cool, so I'm going to bring the gain plugin back, turn the mono off. Now check it out. Now if we take a look at the goniometer, that's also going to let us know about the phase information of our track. Now phase is very abstract, I know, but I'll demonstrate to you real quick how easy it is to dissect. So the goniometer is kind of like part 2 of the correlation meter or vice versa. And it's just telling us like what's the distribution from left to right, left, mid, right. And are we going a little too far outside the left and right? Are we creating a stereo situation that's a little unnatural and it's actually hurting the phase of our track? And what I love about the goniometer is you can actually set how big or small the display is. And you can set the decay as well. I actually like to set auto gain to 100%. I like to set the decay basically to 100%. So I'm seeing in full view what's going on here. Now, if we take the gain plugin and we phase invert one side against the other, so now this track is going to be, for all intents and purposes, out of phase with itself. Now check it out. Watch both the correlation meter and the goniometer. It kind of sounds like your brain's getting sucked out of your ears, doesn't it? The right side's out of phase with the left, and so the goniometer, instead of basically being straight up and down and kind of floating between left and right, it's completely horizontal, which is bad news. And the correlation meter here, you can see it's completely in the red. It's just bad news altogether. So we know that this track is out of phase with itself, and we got to fix that. So obviously we would just do that and we'd be good to go. Now, many of us are not flipping the phase on half of our mix and causing such a problem to our mix. But what many of us may be doing is using things like stereo enhancement plugins, like everywhere in our mix, and causing some situations that are not helpful to our mix. Very often I've seen Logic projects where there's a lot of stereo enhancement plugins, and I'm going to be real with you, I rarely touch those things. I use it maybe once in a blue moon. If I'm mastering a track, I'll add a touch of stereo enhancement. Obviously, I'm not saying don't use them. I'm just saying use them sparingly because they can cause more problems than they help. And to demonstrate this, I'm actually going to load up one of the imaging plugins, the direction mixer, just so we can see what's going on our goniometer and our correlation meter. So we'll start listening to this track, and I'll just start stretching the spread. Okay, so the correlation meter is not living in the red, and the goniometer is turning more into a ball of some sort, and it's really spreading a little too far outside the left and right. The correlation meter is jumping around a bit, dipping into the res, and this is because I've stretched the mix to such a point that it audibly sounds hollow in the middle. And it's hurting the phase of our track, it's hurting the mono compatibility of our tracks, and I've just stretched this out to such a point that it's just not comfortable to listen to. And if we throw this gain plug in at the tail end and swap to mono, check it out. Doesn't sound that good. Get rid of the directional mixer. Way more stability. Sounds way more natural for the mix. So the whole point is that the multimeter is an amazing tool, and it combines all the different metering tools in Logic to give you, just once and done a view of what's going on with your mix across the spectrum in terms of phase and mono compatibility, levels, loudness. And it's truly a professional tool. I love it. Place it on the stereo output and you're good to go. So I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week I'm posting new videos, new emails, and posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Thanks so much.